My mom handed my daughter skin whitening cream at the Christmas party. You're too dark, put this on, she said with a smirk. My sister's kid got a new gaming console. My daughter burst into crying. Mom, why only me? My sister sneered, well, it's perfect for her. Isn't it? Then everyone was frozen by what I did next. The harshness of Boston's winter reminded Carol Johnson of the coldness she felt every time she returned to her childhood home. She parked her car in front of her mother's house and gazed at her daughter Jasmine, who was fiddling with her cell phone in the passenger seat. The 12-year-old girl had already sensed her mother's anxiety. Mom, are you okay? Jasmine looked up with her shining dark eyes. Her skin was a slightly deeper shade than Carol's, who had an African-American father and a white mother. Yes, of course, Carol smiled, but her voice trembled slightly. Aren't you looking forward to seeing Grandma and Taylor? Jasmine shrugged. Taylor's always playing his own games. But I do like Grandma's cookies. Well then, shall we go? Carol took a deep breath and got out of the car. Linda Johnson's house was known for its meticulously maintained garden, even in the well-kept suburban neighborhood. She never missed tending to her garden every Sunday before going to church. Having been raised in a conservative white community, Linda valued keeping up appearances above all else. Before the front door opened, Carol straightened the collar of Jasmine's winter coat and whispered, "Let's have a nice time today. Promise? Carol, Jasmine. You've finally made it." Linda appeared at the door. Her perfectly dyed blonde hair was impeccably styled as always, and her holiday red sweater fit snugly against her body. "Hello, Mom." Carol kissed her mother's cheek. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Grandma." Jasmine greeted politely as she had been instructed. Linda lightly embraced Jasmine's shoulders while examining the girl's face. "My, haven't you gotten darker? Even though summer's over." Carol painfully understood the hidden meaning behind those words. "Mom, that's Jasmine's natural skin color," Carol said quietly but firmly. This type of conversation had been repeated countless times since her daughter was born. "Of course, dear." Linda laughed lightly and changed the subject. "Come on in. Brenda and Taylor are already here." Entering the living room, Carol saw her sister Brenda sitting on the sofa drinking wine. Brenda had the same blonde hair as their mother and wore expensive clothes. Next to her, her 10-year-old son Taylor was absorbed in his latest tablet. "Carol, you finally made it," Brenda said without standing up. "Busy with work, I suppose?" Her voice carried its usual sarcasm. "Yes, especially at the end of the year," Carol replied. As a marketing director at an advertising agency, the Christmas season was her busiest time. Divorced for 5 years, she had been raising Jasmine alone while building her career. "Taylor, say hello to your cousin," Brenda told her son. Taylor briefly looked up from his screen, said hi, and immediately returned to his game. Linda came in from the kitchen with drinks. "Carol, your favorite wine." "Jasmine, would you like a Coke?" "Thanks, Mom." Carol accepted the glass and looked around the living room decorations. The annual Johnson family Christmas party was where her mother's perfectionism was fully displayed. Sparkling tree, elegant ornaments, and family photos adorning the mantelpiece. However, Carol noticed there wasn't a single wedding photo of her and her ex-husband Michael. "How's Jason?" Carol asked about Brenda's husband. "Business meeting in Australia. Unfortunately, he can't make it back tonight," Brenda answered, brushing back her hair. "But he sent plenty of presents for Taylor." Carol watched Jasmine trying to talk to Taylor. "That new game looks fun," she said, but Taylor merely shrugged. The aroma of food wafted in from the kitchen. Linda proudly announced, "I've prepared turkey and ham. And Carol, I made that sweet potato casserole you like. Need any help?" Carol offered. "It's fine. Brenda came early and we've got almost everything ready." Linda smiled at Brenda. Her sister had always been their mother's favorite. With her perfect white husband and pure lineage son, Brenda was Linda's ideal daughter. Carol gazed out the window. Snow had begun to fall quietly. After her divorce from Michael, she had tried to repair her relationship with her mother. Ironically, Linda seemed somewhat more accepting after the divorce, though she had never truly accepted her daughter's choice to marry a black man. Still, the subtle changes in her attitude toward Jasmine didn't escape Carol's notice. "Shall we exchange gifts before dinner?" Linda suddenly suggested. "Since everyone's here now." "Yes, that's a good idea," Brenda agreed immediately. "Taylor can hardly wait." Jasmine's eyes lit up. This was why she had been looking forward to this day. Carol smiled, enduring this tense family gathering just to see her daughter's happy face. "Yes, let's exchange gifts," she answered. Linda began taking wrapped boxes from under the tree. "Let's start with Taylor." Linda handed a large box to her grandson. "This is a special present from Grandma." Taylor excitedly tore off the wrapping and opened the box. "Wow, the latest gaming console." He jumped up and down. "It's the one I wanted. Everyone has one except me." Carol couldn't hide her surprise. That latest gaming console had just been released and was sold out everywhere. She herself had tried to reserve one for Jasmine but couldn't get her hands on one. Looking at Jasmine, she could see a mixture of expectation and envy in her daughter's eyes. "How did you get it?" Carol asked Linda. "Connections, dear," Linda answered proudly. Brenda's Jason arranged for it through a contact. They set one aside especially for him. Brenda smiled contentedly and said, "Only the best for Taylor." She turned to Carol and asked, "Is Jasmine interested in games too?" Her tone contained the sarcasm that Carol knew all too well. "Yes, Jasmine is too," Carol answered quietly. Her daughter had been saving her allowance for 6 months for that gaming console. Now for Jasmine, Linda took out a small package from under the tree and handed it to Jasmine. "This is from Grandma." Jasmine carefully began unwrapping the paper. Her movements showed a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. "Thank you, Grandma," she said. Inside was a small white box. When she opened the box, there was a small bottle of cream. Jasmine picked up the bottle with a confused expression and read the label. "Skin whitening cream?" Her voice trembled slightly. "Yes, a special skin whitening cream," Linda said happily. "You're a bit too dark. Use this." She smiled maliciously. "It'll make you more popular at school." A heavy silence fell over the room. Carol was speechless, feeling a painful ache in her chest. She could see the color draining from her daughter's face. "Mom." Jasmine looked at Carol, tears welling in her eyes. Before Carol could say anything, Brenda burst out laughing. "Isn't it the perfect gift?" she said. "If you want to fit in with the white kids at school, this is what you need." A tear rolled down Jasmine's face. "Mom, why am I the only one?" Her voice was small and shaky. Taylor was still engrossed in his new gaming console, seemingly oblivious to the situation. However, Linda and Brenda clearly wore satisfied expressions. "It's just a joke." "A joke," Linda said lightly. "Don't be so sensitive. It's just a skincare product. Don't all girls need them?" Something broke inside Carol. Years of suppressed anger and sadness came rushing to the surface. She slowly stood up. The air in the room felt frozen. "Jasmine, give that cream back to Grandma," Carol said quietly but firmly. "But Carol," Linda protested. "I specifically chose it for her. Don't ruin the party atmosphere." Carol opened her wallet and took out several bills. $5,000, she placed the stack of bills on the table. "This is my last gift to you, on the condition that we never see each other again." "Carol," Linda exclaimed in surprise. "What are you saying?" "We're family." "Family?" Carol said sarcastically. "Family loves and respects each other. What you're doing isn't love." Brenda stood up. "You're being dramatic. You always are, Carol. Can't you take a joke?" "This isn't a joke." Carol placed her hand on her trembling daughter's shoulder. "This is racism. Discrimination against my daughter." Linda looked shocked. "Discrimination? I was just what?" Carol interrupted. "Just telling my 12-year-old daughter that her skin color is wrong? That her black heritage is something to be ashamed of?" Jasmine was crying quietly. Carol held her tightly. "You have just deeply hurt my daughter," Carol said calmly. "And this isn't the first time. I've endured your subtle discrimination for years. Since my marriage to Michael, since Jasmine was born, and even after the divorce." Linda sank into her chair and mumbled, "I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did," Carol said. "Come on, Jasmine. Let's go." She took Jasmine's hand and placed the cream on the table in front of Linda. "This is what you need. A cream to beautify your heart." Carol started walking toward the door. Jasmine was still crying softly beside her. As they left, Linda's voice called out from behind, "Carol, wait." Carol didn't look back. When she opened the door, the cold winter air greeted them. Snow continued to fall quietly. "Jasmine, you are perfect. Your skin color, everything about you," Carol told her daughter. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." They walked hand in hand toward the car. There was a sound of the door opening behind them, but Carol didn't turn around. Carol gripped the steering wheel tightly as she drove away from her mother's house. Beside her, Jasmine was still trembling slightly. Only the sound of snow hitting the windshield broke the heavy silence in the car. "Jazz, are you okay?" Carol gently asked her daughter when they stopped at a red light. Jasmine nodded slightly, still staring out the window. "Mom, is there something wrong with my skin?" Her voice was thin and broke Carol's heart. "Absolutely not," Carol said firmly. "Your skin is beautiful. You are perfect just as you are." Jasmine looked at Carol for the first time. Tears glistened in her eyes. "But Grandma and Aunt Brenda, they are wrong," Carol interrupted. "Their thinking is old and narrow. And above all, they don't understand the seriousness of hurting someone in the name of love." When they got home, Carol made hot chocolate in the kitchen. It had been their ritual since Jasmine was little. When they had difficult days, they would talk over hot chocolate. "I'm sorry for ruining Christmas," Carol said as she floated marshmallows in the cups. "It's not your fault, Mom." Jasmine wrapped both hands around her mug. "I've noticed it for a while. The way Grandma looks at me a little differently." Carol was surprised by how observant her daughter was. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want to make you sad," Jasmine sniffled. "Grandma is your mom, and Taylor is my cousin, their family." Carol felt her chest tighten. She had endured subtle racism since childhood, and now, she had allowed the same pain to be inflicted on her daughter. "I won't let that happen to you ever again," she vowed firmly. That night, after Jasmine had fallen asleep, Carol secluded herself in her study. She took an old laptop from the drawer and entered the password. The screen displayed a folder titled Family Records. 5 years ago, right after the divorce, Carol had begun recording her mother and sister's comments. Initially intended as merely a diary, with advice from her ex-husband Michael, who was a lawyer, she occasionally secretly recorded conversations at family gatherings. "You might need it someday," Michael's words now echoed in her ears. Carol opened the files and began listening to the recordings. Her mother's words from a past Thanksgiving, "You should be careful Jasmine doesn't get too tanned. Her skin color is already dark enough." Brenda's comment at Jasmine's 7th birthday party, "Mixed-race children sometimes develop really difficult personalities, because they don't fully belong to either world." The recordings contained countless discriminatory comments, sarcasm, and mockery accumulated over the years. Tears welled in Carol's eyes. Why had she accepted these humiliations for so long? During her marriage to Michael, he had been a shield for the family. But after the divorce, she had to fight alone. The thought that she should maintain family relationships for Jasmine's sake had kept her silent, but tonight, that final line had been crossed. She sat at her computer and began planning. She opened a video editing software, arranged the recordings chronologically, and organized them by theme: domestic racism, complex family relationships, impact on mixed-race children. As a marketing professional, she knew the power of storytelling. And now, it was time for her own story to be told. Over the next few weeks, Carol worked on editing the video late into the night after finishing her day job. She added commentary to the recordings and applied mosaic effects to faces but left the voices and situations intact. The title was Domestic Racism in the Case of My Mother and Sister. It became one woman's testimony about confronting racism in both public and private spheres. She created an anonymous YouTube account and hesitated many times before uploading the final video. The question, "Is this revenge or justice?" plagued her mind, but each time she remembered Jasmine's tear-filled face on Christmas night, her resolve strengthened. The night the upload complete notification appeared, Carol could barely sleep. The next morning, she nervously opened her computer. The video had gained thousands of views overnight. The comments section was filled with messages of empathy and support. "This is happening in my family too. As a mother with a mixed-race daughter, thank you for your courage. We need to talk more about racism within families." By the third day, a local news site had picked up the video. "Exposing domestic racism, anonymous mother's revelation goes viral" was the headline. A week later, national media began covering the topic, and a social dialogue about domestic racism spread. Carol was surprised at the reaction as she watched the news, having never expected to cause such an impact. Civil rights organizations began contacting her. "We need voices like yours," they said. One evening, when Jasmine returned from school, her expression was bright. "Mom, today we had a discussion about family and race at school," Jasmine said as she placed her backpack on the floor. "The teacher talked about how there can be difficult conversations about race even within families." "I see." Carol felt her heart racing. "What kind of discussion was it?" "The teacher showed us a video. And Mom, it looked just like us." Jasmine looked at Carol seriously. "Did you make that?" Carol took a deep breath. "Yes, I did," she admitted. "For you and children in similar situations." Jasmine was quiet for a moment. "Are you angry?" Carol asked softly. "No." Jasmine slowly shook her head. "But what about Grandma and Aunt Brenda? Have they seen the video?" "I don't know yet," Carol answered honestly, but the answer became clear soon enough. On the evening news, a local reporter stood in front of Linda's house. "The women in the anonymous video have been identified, causing ripples in the community," the narration said. The camera captured Linda hurriedly getting into her car. Her face looked dark and depressed. A few days later, Carol received a call at work. "Carol, it's me." Linda's voice sounded weak, lacking its usual confident tone. "What do you want?" Carol asked calmly. "I lost my position as a church elder," Linda said in a tearful voice. "Everyone's avoiding me. Brenda's having a hard time at work too." "Was this your doing?" Carol exhaled deeply. "I only told the truth." "You betrayed family," Linda accused. "No. It was you who continued to betray family while pretending to love and accept," Carol said firmly. The call ended, and Carol sank deep into her chair. She hadn't anticipated the video would have such a significant impact. Though she had mixed feelings, her conviction that her actions were for her daughter and children in similar situations remained unshaken. That night, an email arrived from a civil rights organization requesting a speaking engagement. "Would you share your experience on domestic racism?" Carol stared at the email for a while. The idea of her personal pain becoming part of a larger social discussion filled her with both fear and hope. But seeing Jasmine watching TV in the living room, she strengthened her resolve. This wasn't just her battle. It was time for more voices to be raised. She began typing her response. "Ms. Carol Johnson, 5 minutes until we're live." At the staff member's voice, Carol stared at her reflection in the makeup room mirror. The green room of the nationally famous talk show Morning America was smaller than she had imagined. Despite having seen numerous shooting locations as a video director, she couldn't shake the nervousness of being on the opposite side of the camera. 3 months had passed since the video was posted. Her anonymous video Domestic Racism in America had now been viewed over 7 million times and sparked nationwide discussion. Schools were revising their curricula on family and diversity, and thousands of people had begun speaking out about their own experiences within their families. Carol had wanted to remain anonymous, but when a prominent critic questioned the authenticity of her experience, she made up her mind. Today, she intended to reveal herself as the video's creator on national television. "Mom, are you nervous?" Turning at Jasmine's voice, she saw her daughter sitting on a small sofa, fiddling with her phone. At Carol's insistence, Jasmine wasn't participating in the interview but waiting backstage. "A little," Carol admitted, "but I think this is the right thing to do." "Me too," Jasmine said with a serious expression. "There are kids at school saying they've been able to talk with their families because of that video." Carol felt a warmth in her chest. Initially, she had only intended to share her and her daughter's experience, but it had become the voice of many. The program assistant escorted her to the studio. Surrounded by bright lights and cameras, famous host Diana Porter smiled at her. "Today we have a special guest," Diana addressed the viewers. Several months ago, an anonymous video about domestic racism exploded on social media. Today, the creator of that video speaks in public for the first time. "Carol Johnson, thank you for joining us." The camera turned to Carol. She took a deep breath. "Thank you for having me. First, Why did you decide to reveal yourself today? Diana asked. To defend the truth, Carol answered quietly. When my experience was questioned, I felt that remaining silent would be a betrayal to children in the same situation as my daughter. Diana nodded. Your video shed light on the rarely discussed issue of racism within families. Can you tell us more about your experience growing up as a mixed-race child? Carol began talking about her childhood. As a child with a white mother and black father, she had always fought the feeling of not fully belonging to either side. How her mother's family had seen her as different, and the pain of watching her own daughter go through the same experience. Can you tell us about that Christmas night? Diana carefully asked. Carol looked up. My mother gave my daughter a skin whitening cream. With the words, "You're a bit too dark," her voice trembled slightly. She told a 12-year-old girl that her skin color was wrong. The studio fell silent. What I feared most was that my daughter would begin to doubt herself, Carol continued. Children internalize their family's words. I did, and that leads to self-hatred and loss of confidence. How did your family react after you published the video? Initially with anger, Carol acknowledged. They called me a traitor, but I only told the truth. My aim wasn't to hurt family. I just realized that by continuing to stay silent, we perpetuate discrimination. The interview continued beyond the scheduled 20 minutes. Many questions came in from viewers. Finally, Diana revealed unexpected information. Carol, you may not know this, but your mother has contacted the program, Diana said. She says she wants to meet you. Privately, not in front of cameras. Carol froze in surprise. My mother? Yes, she's waiting backstage. Of course, whether you meet her is your decision. Carol thought for a moment, then nodded. I'll meet her. After the program ended, she was led to the green room. When she opened the door, Linda was sitting there. In 3 months, her mother seemed to have visibly aged. Carol felt a pang in her chest at the sight. Carol, Linda stood up. Her eyes were red with tears. Mom, Carol said, maintaining her distance. I heard your talk. All of it, Linda said in a trembling voice. I was wrong. Carol felt as if time had stopped. She had never heard her mother utter such words. Linda was searching for words. I couldn't escape the old way of thinking. My parents were the same way. But that's no excuse, is it? No, it's not, Carol quietly agreed. Will you let me see Jasmine? Linda asked pleadingly. I want to apologize. To her? And to you. Carol hesitated a bit. That's for her to decide. When Carol opened the door and called Jasmine, the girl cautiously entered the green room. She saw her grandmother and stopped. Jasmine, Linda said, holding back tears. Grandma is truly sorry. For hurting you. For denying your beauty. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know. Grandma loves you. And I'm trying to learn. Jasmine looked up at Carol, then back at Linda. It will take time, she said. I can't believe you right away. I understand, Linda nodded. I'll take time to prove it. Carol wasn't yet convinced that this change was genuine. What about Brenda? She asked. Linda's expression darkened. She's still not trying to understand. She says you've aired the family's dirty laundry in public. Carol sighed. As expected. But I want to change, Linda said. It might be too late, but I want to start over. Carol nodded slowly. It will take time, and trust must be demonstrated through actions. I understand, Linda agreed. I want to start with any small step. That night, after Jasmine had fallen asleep in the hotel room, Carol went out to the balcony and gazed at the city lights. Was change possible, or was this just a temporary reaction? She didn't know, but one thing was certain. By taking a step today, something new had begun. Her phone rang. It was a message from a civil rights organization. Your interview has inspired many people. Would you speak on a national tour? Carol took a deep breath. This was no longer just her story. It had become part of something bigger. Today, I'd like to introduce a special guest. Carol Johnson, author of Breaking Walls: A Journey of Race, Love, and Reconciliation. A year later, Carol stood in the spacious hall of the Boston Public Library. Before her were people of various ages and races. 3 months after its release, her book had become a national bestseller and an important volume in promoting dialogue about racial issues within families. Thank you all for coming, Carol began speaking calmly. A year ago, I couldn't imagine what would happen by making family secrets public. It wasn't just an expression of anger, but a necessity to break years of silence. Among the audience, Carol spotted her mother Linda sitting next to Jasmine. Linda had changed greatly over the year. She had joined local racial understanding programs and began speaking to white women of her generation about unconscious bias. Repairing the relationship with Carol and Jasmine had been a difficult journey, but they were progressing one small step at a time. Change is possible, Carol continued. It comes with pain and may even break relationships at times. But only by facing the truth can real healing begin. After the lecture, a woman waiting in line for the book signing spoke to her. Miss Johnson, hearing your story gave me the courage to face my own daughter. We're also a mixed family and have had similar issues. Carol put down her pen and looked into her eyes. The first step is the hardest, but you've already taken that step. As she was leaving, her phone rang. An unexpected name appeared on the screen. It was from Brenda. Carol? Her sister's voice lacked its former arrogance. I want to talk about Taylor. Brenda's son Taylor had caused problems at school by making racist comments and was ordered by the school to participate in a counseling program. Ironically, it was a program that Carol had helped create. What's wrong? Carol asked, taking out her car keys. He's beginning to change. Brenda's voice was filled with surprise. After the program, he started asking me questions. Why I acted that way toward you and Jasmine, why Grandma did what she did. I couldn't answer. Carol stopped. And? I've started going to counseling too, Brenda confessed. I want to face the prejudice within me. It might be too late, but Carol smiled. It's never too late, if you have the will to change. That night, Carol leaned against the doorframe of Jasmine's bedroom, watching her sleeping daughter. Now 13, she had grown significantly over the year. Rather than being ashamed of her skin color, she had come to take pride in it. At school, she had started a diversity club, creating a space for other children to talk about their identities. Carol's phone vibrated with an email from the publisher. They were planning to publish a young adult version of her book. There's an important message that should be conveyed to young readers too, they wrote. Looking out the window, she could see the first flowers of spring beginning to bloom. A new season, a new beginning. Carol took a deep breath. Sometimes, the most beautiful changes arise from the deepest wounds.